So, good evening everyone. Thank you for joining us. This is really an important event. We view it as to be an important event. Obviously, it's not the event that we wanted to organise, but Matt has made his way down here. As you'll know, the role of General Secretary within the FBU is a really important role. It's crucial for the union because it picks our leadership going forward. That leadership then provides our union with a voice and a vision, and it helps guide us through the challenges that we're going to face moving forward. Whether that's, crewing issues, it could be pay, whatever it may be. For us, it's important that, the Fire Brigades Union remains strong, we remain united, resolute in defending our members' rights and the integrity of the fire service. So this evening we'd hoped to welcome Steve Wright here as well. He's standing in opposition to Matt. However, he's not been able to join us. He has provided us with a statement, and he has got a sick form event to attend with his daughter. So I'm sure we can all understand that, personal commitments, especially to our family, are quite important. In fact, they're the most important, aren't they? His family before. So we are privileged to have Matt here, and I'd like to thank him for making the journey. It is much appreciated, and Matt is someone who will need no introduction to most people here. He has served our union for many years now, representing our members, and we will allow Matt to introduce himself in a minute. So, sorry Matt. The Hustings is an opportunity for members to ask questions. We have got pre-selected questions that have been sent in to us, so I will present those questions to Matt. We'll give him 5 minutes to answer each one of those questions, and if I feel the need, I'll push a little bit more on them to try to get a bit of a deeper answer. I'll chair the session to try and ensure fairness and focus, and provide opportunities for people to potentially engage later on in the session as well. So I want to make it productive, I want to make it respectful, and we'll see how we go and how Matt answers the questions. So Matt, if you want to introduce yourself.
Thanks very much, Martin, for the introduction. Thanks to the Brigade Committee for hosting the event, and for the regional officials for assisting in it. And I very much appreciate the opportunity to come and put my case for my re-election as General Secretary. And I think it's an important debate, an important discussion that needs to be had for our members. It's about our members and their union and what they want to see out of their union in the next over the next 5 years, and that's what we should be discussing and debating. And I'm standing partly on my record, and I'll say some things about that, but actually in reality on the question of where we need to be over the next 5 years, what I think the challenges we're facing are, and what we can do and what we can try and achieve over that 5 years. In terms of, I'll try not to dwell too much. It's a shame that Steve is not here and has not agreed to debate me in any forum as part of the election, because the truth is, if you look over the past year at our Executive Council, which makes decisions between conferences, actually no alternative has been put forward on the question of pay, on pensions, on jobs, on standards in our service that suggests that anything that we've done as the current leadership has been incorrect, wrong, or needs to be adjusted. And I would have appreciated the opportunity to discuss that face to face with other people. And I've said that to other members of the Executive Council who are supporting Steve. If you look at the past 14 years, we've been through probably the most difficult time in the modern history of our union and our service. 14 years of austerity. You've never seen the same level of central government attacks on pay for such a long period of time. The level of cuts that have been imposed on public services, including on the fire and rescue service. The impact of that on our service has been a record number of fire station closures, a record number of the loss of fire engines, A record number of job losses. We've lost something like 12,000 jobs across the UK, frontline firefighter jobs. It's the attacks on our pensions, the attacks on our pay, and the attacks on conditions of service, and the attacks on safe ways of working. And as part of my touring around the country for this campaign, I've picked up in particular the anger that people have on the question of the attack on crewing levels, and some of the horror stories that I've picked up of under-resourced fire engines being sent out with crews of 4 in most cases, being left at lengthy periods of time trying to tackle major fires while they wait for support because of the cuts and the impact in certain of our fire and rescue services. That's what we've been through. And yet, I think we can be very proud as a union that we've come through that in one piece. We've had people who have tried to divide this union, tried to break this union, tried to break national conditions of service, tried to break national pay, and we've come through and they have not achieved any of those things. I was told 20 years ago that the National Joint Council, by which we negotiate our pay and conditions, could not survive, but it has survived. We've still got national collective bargaining for pay and conditions. Indeed, we're the only part of the public sector that has UK-wide pay terms and conditions left in place. And I think we should be very proud that we've been able to defend that. And we've used the term, there's an opportunity, and I'll come on to the election and so on and in a second, but we've begun to use the term, the need to rebuild. Our service has been under the cosh for those 14 years. In fact, I'd argue longer than that. The fragmentation was actually introduced by the last Labour government in reality, the fragmentation and lack of standards in the fire and rescue service. But that's been then used as the basis by which austerity could be imposed. And we've begun to say that this is now a time where we can rebuild. I was in Manchester yesterday, and a bit of good news that due to pressure on the Greater Manchester Mayor, Andy Burnham, there is an agreement to restore 2 pumps, one at Manchester Central, one at Moss Side, which were previously cut. That's a significant bit of good news where a fire service, instead of cutting stations and cutting fire engines, is actually bringing back the relevant fire engine and the supporting crews that are necessary. We need to see more and more of that across the country over the next year and over the next few years. Now, elections, and I'm talking about the General Secretary election, elections are a time when it's quite easy to make promises. And I just want to take a few moments to say some things about the things that we have actually achieved while I've been General Secretary. I don't claim that they are all down to me personally, because we're a collective organisation and we have to work as part of a team. We have to work, I have a fantastic team at head office of full-time officials. I work with the Executive Council, I work with regional and brigade officials. We have a fantastic group of staff who also help to play the role in delivering what this union needs. But we have, I think one of the things I'm actually proudest of, may not actually be on everyone's radar. We have maintained the Fire Brigades Union as an independent specialist fire service union. Anyone who knows anything about the trade union movement, and you look at the names of unions that used to exist, they no longer exist. You look at the print industry, there used to be at least 3 print unions. They're all now part of Unite. I remember as a younger person being involved in a strike in a clothing factory in Manchester, part of the National Union of Tailor and Garment Workers. That union no longer exists. It's part of Unite. So we maintain in a specialist union, I think it's the best thing for firefighters, but it also means we have to be viable. And when you lose 12,000 the job intervenes. When you lose 12,000 jobs, that means we lost 12,000 members, and that means 12,000 sets of contributions to us. That's a huge, that's millions of pounds of income. So we've survived. We're financially viable. We've introduced things like the Firefighters 100 lottery, which funds research, funds the decon research, funds the Red Plaque scheme. We've introduced the Red Plaque scheme, which hugely popular. We did one in the West Midlands region just in the past couple of weeks. We fund the Decon project, groundbreaking research that this union is leading, that actually should be the responsibility of employers and government, but because they have completely failed to do it, we have done it, and we should be very proud collectively of doing that. But I would argue none of those things happen by accident. They happen because of thinking, strategizing and planning and leadership. We've fought battles that people didn't think we could fight. We've got a proud record of standing up for officials of this union who are victimised, and we fought battles over that. There's a debate nationally around what's now called fire and rehire. We faced that battle in the fire service in South Yorkshire, in London and here in the West Midlands. And we have said we are not having fire and rehire in the fire service, and we fought it off, and we should be very proud that we have fought it off. On the question of pay, if you, and I'm interested if there are questions on this, very much welcome then. But if you look at 2022, 23 and 24, I think we can be extremely proud of what we achieved, of starting with an offer from our employers of 2%. Let's remember that, 2%. We shifted them to a 5% offer in the October. We then had an attempt to play divide and rule by the London Fire Brigade with a 6 and 5% offer. We balloted our members to reject the 5%. We balloted our members for a strike. And we then achieved a 7% and a 5% offer. That followed by this year by the 4% offer, with the first increase in the retaining fee in decades. In fact, we can't find any record of a previous increase in the proportion that is paid in the retaining fee. And of course, the increase in maternity pay at a national level. And that has opened doors about further improvements to pay and to the pay structure, because I'm certainly not complacent. I'm certainly not arguing that makes up for lost ground, but it is a good start, a good solid start built upon the unity that we've got in this union, the unity that you have demonstrated, the unity that your members in stations and fire controls have demonstrated. Because one thing that I have taken some exception to in this election debate is the idea this union is disunited. This union, through its membership, has been united throughout those difficult years, throughout those campaigns, whether they're local campaigns or national campaigns on pay. We've now got a new government, and I think this is our opportunity to start to push back on the cuts agenda that we've faced for 14 years. We've seen cuts, we've seen slowing down of response times. They talk about modernisation, but we're getting to fires slower than we were 30 years ago across the country. That's a staggering indictment to the people leading the fire and rescue service. We've got the failure of their employers to address decon. We've got a tax on crewing levels. But under this government, the new government, we worked before the election to demand certain improvements. We raised the question of national standards, and we've got a pledge that there will be some form of national standards in the fire service. And let's remember, national standards were abolished in 2004, and if this generation of FBU members can begin to rebuild national standards, that will be something we can all be very proud of, and it will be a magnificent achievement. We've got a pledge that there will be a national advisory body on those standards, and indeed, to the credit of the government, and I am occasionally a critic of this government and known as that, we've got that first meeting scheduled for December, for early December, with the minister to start discussing how we go about building that. So we've got an opportunity. If we stay united, if we stay organised, and if we carry on campaigning and where necessary fighting, we've got an opportunity to really push back on the agenda that most of you, some people have faced all your career, nothing but cuts and attacks by our employers, and to say actually it's time to change direction. It's time to rebuild the fire service, to build a fire service genuinely fit for the 21st century, for the threats of an ageing population, new technology, climate change, and all those challenges where our service and our profession could play such a valuable role in society if we have the right resources, if we have the right investment, and we make no apologies that along with that goes the decent pay, terms and conditions that our members deserve. We've got the opportunity to shape that future. Let's take it together, and I think that's the real issue we should be debating in this election. Thanks very much.
Cheers, Matt. So, like I said, I have got a statement from Steve Wright. I am going to read it out. You just have to bear with me because I am going to be making sure I get it spot on. So Steve Wright's statement, he sent it in and he has said, I have made clear that I will attend regional, brigade and sectional committees where and when invited to explain my reasons for standing in the General Secretary election. The limitations on my ability to do so are the need and desire not to adversely impact on my other duties and responsibilities as EC member for Region 12 and Vice President, and having to do so in my own time because of a canvassing policy and not using union resources regarding head-to-heads. My position on this is set out and can be found in my social media messages and on the Steve 4GS website. So that's the statement that Steve has sent in to us. I did tell him, I'd read it out verbatim for him, and I just wonder if you've got any thoughts on that, Matt.
Or just to be absolutely clear, all my campaigning is done in my own time. I've taken leave for today. I've travelled at my own expense, and all my campaigning is done at my own expense or through funds raised through our campaign. So I'm not using any union resources or any union time for the work that I'm doing as part of the General Secretary campaign.
Thank you. Okay, so if we move on to the questions, we've got a numerous amount of questions actually off individuals. So if I read them out to you, and then what we'll do is we'll give you 5 minutes to provide an answer to that, and then I may expand on those questions.
Okay.
If you're okay with that. So the first question is to do with the decon campaign and cancer, and it says that we know that the job-related cancer and disease is killing many more firefighters than fires will ever do. Do you pledge to support furthering the decon campaign to save lives and minimise cancers in our profession?
Look, it's an excellent question, and I think it's the decon and the risk of cancers and other diseases is a huge issue for a lot of members and is raised with me virtually everywhere I go. I had the great pleasure last week of visiting the University of Central Lancashire with Ricardo Latorre, the National Officer who leads on health and safety, and 2 officials from Lancashire. And we spent a day with Professor Anna Steck and her team. It's a fantastic team. She's got 5 strands of work and research that are underway. So I'm absolutely committed to that work. As I say, we could not be delivering that work if we hadn't previously set up the Firefighters 100 lottery. And that was set up in advance of our centenary year. As I said in opening, I think it's a scandal that we have to do that because it should be employers and governments who are funding that. But it has provided us with the evidence to begin to push for, first of all, it needs tackling in lots of ways. I think it raises very fundamental questions about the whole fire service. It raises questions about how we fight fires, when we get reliefs, what our fire engines look like, what our PPE looks like and is. It raises questions about how fire stations are designed. I know that the crew that just left, we had meetings with them about how stations here in the West Midlands have begun to redesign their own workplace to make it safer. But that's only just the beginning of it. There's lots more that needs to be done. Professor Steck's team are currently, as you know, we did the testing. I know we did some here in the West Midlands of firefighters doing the blood, urine testing, and that's to identify what health monitoring is necessary. What diseases should we be screening for? That work is now underway, and we will then need to demand of our employers that we have health monitoring. That will lead to all sorts of issues like presumptive legislation. We've already registered our case on that, but that's a battle that we haven't yet won. We have made this case in the House of Commons already. We need to make that with the government at Westminster. We've also got dialogue going on in the devolved government, so I think we've probably we may well make breakthroughs elsewhere than England, first of all. I know the Scottish Government is open-minded to this. So we're approaching this in a very systematic and strategic way, and absolutely it needs to be central to our work over the next 5 years.
Yeah, thank you. I think it is quite an important question because, you know, a lot of us, most of us will have known somebody who's either passed away from cancer, most likely due to the job that we're doing. And, you know, there are other diseases out there that firefighters have suffered from. Do you think we stand a good chance of getting this put into presumptive legislation with the current government?
Well, the government would say they don't make that decision. They've got the body that does it, IAC, and we have already identified there are people who are going to put obstacles in the way of that. So we need to go into this with our eyes open, that it will not be an easy task. However, we know that if you look around the world, and I know most people in the audience will be aware, there is parts of the world, many parts of the United States, of Canada, of Australia, and some to a lesser degree in Europe, where presumptive legislation is already in place. We need to engage with that campaign here in the UK. I think it is winnable. But actually, alongside that, we need to be taking those steps with employers and government to make sure that actually the risks are being minimised. And that does mean altering fire stations, fire engines, how we fight fires, how we come back from fires. And just a few things that jump out at you immediately. There are huge resource implications for this, because that will need investment. If we want health monitoring, it will need investment. If we want to redesign fire stations, there will need to be investment in that. If we want to change how fire engines, how we stow things on fire engines, that will need investment. But also how we tackle fires, it will mean that we can't have people staying at fires for hours on end without relief. They will need to be relieved. That raises questions about crewing levels, the number of fire engines, firefighters that we have, and it will mean building into operational procedures that actually people running fires, officers in charge of fires, will need to ensure people are taken away and can decontaminate. As we've said, you know, shower within an hour. I know that some employers already said, yeah, when we say that, we mean shower within an hour of getting back when we eventually get you back to the station. That's not what the advice that we've got is. So, yeah, we need to absolutely continue this campaign.
Fantastic. Thank you. So the next question is around pay. And the question is that pay settlements over the last 3 years have given many of us financial breathing space during the cost of living crisis. And the working group set up following the 22-23 pay settlement included a commitment to review the pay structure for control firefighters. The report back was disappointing, as it was based on an assessment of control firefighters' roles from 20 years ago. How do you intend to improve pay for control firefighters?
Yeah. Look, I think we need to take advantage of the, as I used the phrase, opening some doors with the pay settlement in 2023 that covered 2022 and 2023. We have pushed on the question of pay. We did that through job evaluation, and further work needs to be done on that. I think the opening of doors means that, ironically, by balloting for a strike but not actually taking strike action, has meant that our employers are more open-minded to discussions on some of these issues. That includes pay progression, it includes the issues that we've raised around control pay, and other gripes that people have had about pay, CPD and so on. But I don't think anyone should be under any illusions that this is going to be easy. We have not been able to, for example, put together a legal challenge on control pay. So we need to go into it with our eyes open that this is going to be a struggle and a challenge. But yes, we need to pursue the question of control pay as part of that whole agenda that we need to address pay across the fire and rescue service as a whole. There are undoubtedly the work of firefighters control has changed hugely. I think one thing that those discussions have identified is it does vary between different fire and rescue services. And we're gonna have to present evidence-based arguments on it. I think the other thing, if I can just touch on another control point, one of the shocking things to me is actually the question of staffing levels and crewing minimum crewing levels in fire controls, where I had a discussion with one official quite recently and asked about minimum levels and was told, well, we've got a minimum level of 3, but we also go down to 2. And you got to begin to question, if we've got minimum levels, how is it we're actually crewing below minimum in possibly a whole number of our emergency fire controls? That obviously plays into stress and so on. And I know the Scottish region has done a great deal of work around the stress on firefighters control. We need to build that whole evidence base together, so that it's not just about the question of pay, but about the question of pay and safe and responsible crewing levels in our emergency fire controls.
Thank you. So the next question is around pay. And the question is that pay settlements over the last 3 years have given many of us financial breathing space during the cost of living crisis. And the working group set up following the 22-23 pay settlement included a commitment to review the pay structure for control firefighters. The report back was disappointing, as it was based on an assessment of control firefighters' roles from 20 years ago. How do you intend to improve pay for control firefighters?
Yeah. Look, I think we need to take advantage of as I use the phrase, opening some doors with the pay settlement in 2023 that covered 2022 and 2023. We have pushed on the question of pay. We did that through job evaluation, and further work needs to be done on that. I think the opening of doors means that, ironically, by balloting for a strike but not actually taking strike action, has meant that our employers are more open-minded to discussions on some of these issues. That includes pay progression. It includes the issues that we've raised around control pay and other gripes that people have had about pay, CPD and so on. But I don't think anyone should be under any illusions that this is going to be easy. We have not been able to, for example, put together a legal challenge on control pay. So we need to go into it with our eyes open that this is going to be a struggle and a challenge. But yes, we need to pursue the question of control pay as part of that whole agenda that we need to address pay across the fire and rescue service as a whole. There are undoubtedly the work of firefighters control has changed hugely. I think one thing that those discussions have identified is it does vary between different fire and rescue services. And we're gonna have to present evidence-based arguments on it. I think the other thing, if I can just touch on another control point, one of the shocking things to me is actually the question of staffing levels and minimum crewing levels in fire controls, where I had a discussion with one official quite recently and asked about minimum levels and was told, well, we've got a minimum level of 3, but we also go down to 2. And you got to begin to question, if we've got minimum levels, how is it we're actually crewing below minimum in possibly a whole number of our emergency fire controls? That obviously plays into stress and so on. And I know the Scottish region has done a great deal of work around the stress on firefighters control. We need to build that whole that whole evidence base together, so that it's not just about the question of pay, but about the question of pay and safe and responsible crewing levels in our emergency fire controls.
Thank you. Just on the matter of pay, I know there were several working groups set up on the back of the campaigns that we ran, and some of those were to do with things like pay for skills for firefighters across the country. Has there been any movement with that?
I think the way that discussion evolved, so in the aftermath of that pay settlement, as we prepared for this year's pay settlement, we set up a series of working groups with the employers. So one was on retained firefighters, for example. I think quite a positive discussion. Another strand was on what we called pay progression. So that the skills issue came into that discussion on pay progression. And if you look at the pay structure in the fire service, it is very flat, i.e. we have trainee rate, development rate, competent rate, and then CPD. And there's an issue around CPD being different in different fire and rescue services, and we pushed on that. And interestingly, we found no objection to our point that there was no justification as to why CPD should be different in different fire and rescue services across the country. We also said that actually, if people choose, for example, not to get promotion, they should nevertheless have a career path whereby they can see their pay progressing during the course of a career. And again, we did not have pushback on that. And it seems to us the best way to resolve issues around skills is to build it into a pay progression system. So I'm aware that in fire and rescue services already there are some skills that are being paid for. And I'm aware that in some services there seem to have been discussions that, frankly, we're not always aware of or involved in. And I think this union's got to have a discussion around, do we want national pay bargaining or do we want local pay bargaining? That's a fundamental issue that we want to have. I've made clear my position very clear that I see it's still snowing. Yes. I've made my position is very clear that we are better with national pay bargaining, so we have to fight that. But the other risk is that actually skills end up being paid through ARAs, which are at the discretion of the employer, which are not pensionable and which are removable. If we want genuine progression pay, which may take account of skills, it needs to be part of core pay. It needs to be permanent. It needs to be not removable, and that's the best way. And that's my model of how we address the question of skills in the skills and progression pay in the fire service.
Fantastic, thank you. So to continue with pay, one of the questions here is, how do you plan to address the low pay levels that trainee firefighters face on joining the job? Trainee firefighters, and I haven't checked this actually, but trainee firefighters are on 30 pence an hour above the living wage, and fire control are below this. Can they have a one-off uplift instead of a percentage rise to address this issue?
Look, the starting point is we need to make sure that we've seen that the end of below inflation pay rises. That's the starting point for anything about addressing pay. I don't expect anyone thinks that we're going to, in a single year, wipe out the years of attacks we've had on pay. And I think it would be naive. It would be a false claim by anyone standing for election to say that we can achieve that in a single pay round. But it certainly has to be our agenda to restore pay and to make sure, first of all, to restore pay, to end the loss of real wages that we've had over that 14 years. We've made a start, but we've not got anywhere near where we need to be. Secondly, to build on that and to build a pay structure that people can have better confidence in, people can understand, is a nationally understood, and as I said earlier, doesn't allow employers to remove it. And I think the question of trainees and development rates of pay would be very much a part and parcel of that. We have had discussions in the past in the union about whether we should have a flat rate pay increases, and I think that is a matter conference has certainly debated before, but has never agreed to pursue. And I think it would be a matter for conference to discuss if we wanted to take that approach. I do have to flag up that actually, again, in part of my visits, I have come across some quite shocking information of which I myself was not aware. I've visited at least one service where we have apprentices who are not even on those rates of pay. Apprentices who are riding fire engines, not on any grey book agreed rate of pay. I think that's shocking and scandalous. I think that is exploitation of people. I think we need to be resisting that. I think anyone who is, and we've got clear policy on it. If you look back probably 2017, 2018 we've got policy on the question of apprentices, and certainly anyone coming into operational training should be on a nationally agreed grey book rate of pay, and certainly anyone riding fire engines should be on a nationally agreed rate of pay. If there are exceptions to that across the country, then we need to work with brigade committees to make sure that anomaly is addressed. And I think that's the way in which we will raise the pay of trainees and development firefighters in the longer term.
Okay. So when we were running the pay campaigns, one of the questions I came across as a brigade secretary, there was many different points of view, and you know, there was a portion of individuals who were saying we're not going to get anything, let's just accept the 2%. Then there were some individuals who were saying, you know, we should go for pay restoration. You mentioned pay restoration there. Yeah. And when we look at other trade unions and some of the arguments that they've taken forward, I think the doctors is one of them, and they did very well out of their pay settlement that they got. They argued for pay restoration. Is there a reason why we didn't go into that and say we want to restore our pay back to 2008 levels?
Look, I think we should be campaigning for pay restoration, and more than that. Whether that's the right demand to raise in a particular year and a particular campaign, I'm more sceptical of. I think we have to be straight and honest with our members. I know some of you lived through the 2002-2003 campaign, and I don't want to, you know, people will have taken different views on the settlement of that campaign, but we went out for what was effectively a 40% pay rise, and we went back to work without a 40% pay rise, and significantly short of that. And the 3 years of pay that we've just won over the 3 years are almost identical to the first 3 pay rises we had after almost 6 months of taking strike action. So we need to learn the lessons of battles that we've fought in the past, and so on. I think we also should not confuse other industries with our own industry. In the junior doctors dispute, and I fully support their campaign, but the truth is that the incoming government had a huge problem with a very significant backlog in operations and procedures, and that was the huge bit of leverage that the junior doctors had. And we shouldn't confuse what their experience is with what our experience is. It struck me that what the government, the new Labour government, wanted to do was to get problems they'd inherited off their desk, so they could then start to deal with their own issues, and that's part of why they settled that particular dispute. I think if you look at other disputes in the public sector, far less successful than the junior doctors one. And I think on balance, in terms of where I would put us among the best results in that round of pay discussions and pay disputes, and we achieved that without any industrial action. I'm not against industrial action where necessary, but I think we don't ballot because we want to go on strike. We ballot because we want to get a result, and obviously our members voted by 96% to accept that pay offer.
Thank you. So if we move on to crewing, and me and you have had a conversation about this today with the crewing issues that we've got across the country, and the question that's come in says that brigades across the country seem to all say that crewing levels are their biggest problem. So how do you believe that we can tackle that and stop the fragmentation that's happening to our service and the way we crew our appliances?
Yeah, first of all, to acknowledge the scale of the problem. Again, I went, because I think this is the value of the election campaign, I suppose. In one fire station, I won't say what service, a watch manager told me about an incident, what's supposed to be a 2 appliance station, but is actually always a 1 appliance station, because the second appliance is sent to cover up for shortages in the retained stations. So the local people may look at their fire station and think they've got a 2 pump station. In reality, they don't have a 2 pump station. In a fairly reasonable sized town. And the watch manager told me of an incident of waiting for 10 to 15 minutes for the supporting pump to arrive at a substantial fire, where he was holding the jet between his legs while trying to operate the entry control board for the BA crew at the same time. That's a scandal. That's a horror story that should not be happening in this day and age, but is. And that's probably just one of many stories like that that could be told around the country. So we have to make a very serious campaign for safe crewing. There are some services where we've managed to maintain better crewing levels. Traditionally, certainly at 1 appliance stations, we would have had a minimum crew of 5. There are some services where if we fall below that, the appliance will be taken off the run for insufficient crewing. But we've got many services where the machine will now stay on the run with a crew of 4. And if we think about it, the crewing at 4 then becomes increasingly the norm. And the crewing at 4 is now increasingly the norm in many, and this is not a criticism of anyone, but it becomes the norm across the fire and rescue service. We've got to try and resist that and turn the tide and say no, a safe crewing. Our union's policy is for a minimum crewing of 5 on all all pumping appliances. That's what we have to try and achieve. How we achieve it, we turn the tables on the employers and the chief fire officers. They've, for the past 20 years, began a race to the bottom, and they've said if they can get away with it in one service, they say, oh, well, they're riding 4s up the road, we can now ride 4s here. We now need to say, yeah, but they're riding 5s in that fire service. We want to aim for the best standard that we've got. We want to deliver. We want to deliver on that. And the other strand to it is on the question of, itchy voice. The other strand of that is the point about national standards. That under national standards previously, we had what were called the confidence levels. And that meant that fire services were required that the first 2 fire engines attending an incident had to ride 5 and 4 on 75% of occasions. And if they didn't achieve that, they were not achieving the national standard. Think about the implications of that today. If we had that sort of standard today, we wouldn't really be having this debate. We would be talking about how do we rise from 5 and 4 to 5 and 5, which has always been the union's policy. So achieving national standards would be a massive step forward towards this. We'll have a battle about that, and we'll have a battle about what those national standards would be. I will be going to a meeting in December to make the case that national standards should cover things like crewing levels, and that our view is that crewing levels should be 5. I've got no doubt there will be chief officers there saying, no, the national standard shouldn't cover things like crewing levels. That should be left down to the discretion of the chief fire officer. So we shouldn't underestimate the scale of the battle we're up against here. That we will face resistance, but we've pushed open a door. We've got an opportunity, and we have to take that. I think crewing levels, it's been fascinating for me. I think every service I've been to, people have raised the question of crewing levels because it feeds through to everything. Can you get your training done? Can you get your leave adequately? All of those things are because, frankly, understaffing in our service, and that needs to be central to what we do over the next couple of years.
Do you want a minute?
No, I'm all right. I'm sorry about that.
So if we move on to pensions, so The FBU were the only union to take on the Tory government over the pension thefts. We eventually won our case back in 2019 and have continued to fight for injury to feeling payments amongst other pension battles. Why has it taken so long to progress payment of the injury to feelings to members and resolve the outstanding issues with the pension trap?
If I can make the first point I would like to make on this is, again, it's about approach of this union, my approach and what I've argued with the Executive Council. And a lot of you will have been through that pensions battle. And many people, the other unions said, this isn't fair. Many of our members said, this isn't fair. What they're doing to our pensions is simply it's simply not fair. Now, we know it's not fair. The problem is the government couldn't care less whether it's fair or not. So the approach we took is different. We said, we will present an evidence-based case as to why you are wrong. And for us, we had to take account of differences between us and other sectors, and particularly around the question of fitness and shift work and ageing. And slightly different for control members to some degree, but not to that greater degree. But that because of fitness standards in the fire service, we produced research on the impact of ageing on fitness levels, and we identified actually there's no objective case as to why you can make the argument that significant numbers of people can maintain that level of fitness up to the age of 60. That inevitably there will be a slowdown in fitness levels in reality from the late 40s onwards, and actually also particularly disproportionately affected women members. So we had an evidence-based case from the start, and when interested in the court case, what our lawyers told us is that through the exchange of evidence, we were able to find letters from Eric Pickles to the Treasury, making the point that actually we can't beat the FBU on the arguments about evidence, and the Treasury writing back saying we don't care about that, just carry on. So we knew that we won the argument on standards in the fire service and on pensions, and I think that hard approach of saying to people, let's not talk about fairness here, let's talk about our job, our occupation, and why they're wrong on the evidence, and that was the basis on which we then the similar approach, a hard-nosed approach, was why we took that case. And it's not, I don't think it's accidental that we were the only union to take the government to court on that particular issue, because we went to lawyer after lawyer, time after time, trying to find a case that could challenge the government. And sadly, the lawyers usually said, yeah, we understand it's not fair, we understand it may be unjust, but it doesn't mean it's unlawful. It was only eventually we found that particular point on age discrimination, and only in relation to one narrow bit of it. Nobody claims we won all the pension points on the transitional arrangements for the transition to the new scheme. But let's remember this as well, by the way, we won 7 years back for our members, but because it was age discriminatory in the firefighters' pension scheme, it was also age discriminatory in every other public sector scheme in the country. So we have won for millions of workers. The last total we saw is £17 billion is what this union won for all the affected groups of workers across all the public sector schemes. And again, I think we should be very, very proud of that. But we don't rest there. We are continuing. We tried to run the case on the new schemes, and you're probably aware, unfortunately, we were not legally successful in that case. The injury to feelings, it is in hand. It's been complicated because of issues such as the retirement of, it was one specialist lawyer we had, some of you will know his name, Ivan Walker. Those of you who are in that case will have had letters off Ivan Walker Ivan Walker has retired. We've had to pass that case to Thompson's. Legally, we had to get permission of people to move that case over. And sadly, lots of legal processes do take a long time. So there is a delay. It's frustrating. There are different bands in the injury to feelings case. We believe it is close to resolution. The cases, the amounts are all in hand. It is simply the signing off the last bits of detail administration in reality of some people, for example, who haven't signed the necessary letters, and it should be done imminently. In relation to the other cases, I suppose our position has always been, and my position in this election is this: if we can find any case where we can challenge the government on any aspect of pensions law, we will do it. And I think we've proved that's what we will do. The pensions trap, whereby people are caught by being partially covered by the previous scheme and partly covered by the new scheme, is something that we have to absolutely address. And we are currently working on different ways in which that could be approached. I suppose the biggest thing, it would be a major change of government policy, would be to allow people to access their previous pension without having to retire from the second pension. But that's going to be again a big challenge, and we shouldn't underestimate how big that is. We are exploring different ways in which people caught by that pensions trap can have their position improved, and we will continue to do that.
Thanks for that, Matt. I'd like to take a 5-minute comfort break, just so that everybody can take a minute. Yeah?
Yeah, of course.
Okay, so if we carry on, we've got one more question that has been put in advance, and then my plan is to open it up to the floor and answer a couple of questions from the floor as well. I believe we have to be done by 8:30 for the gentleman looking after the place. So the next question, Matt, is around divisiveness. So how will you resolve the rifts caused by this election campaign? Some of the social media has been venomous and makes people not want to speak out in support either way, or even ask some questions. How can the FBU go forward with such divisions?
Yeah, this is it's a very important question. First, in terms of overcoming divisions generally, I think that is entirely achievable. I mentioned 2002, 2003, and some of you went through that dispute, and it ended up the union was quite divided at that point, and there were very sharp differences of opinion. And not long after that, I was elected, and I always saw one of my tasks as how do we reunite this union when we've had such a difference of opinion on an industrial matter. I think we did that, and we did it. What I tried to do is focus on what unites us rather than what divides us. And what unites us is the need to fight for a better fire service, for better pay and conditions. And for example, some of the work that we did around firefighter fatalities, you may not have realised it, but precisely for that reason, we launched research, and then we launched campaigns around highlighting the lack of proper record keeping when firefighters are killed at work. So campaigning on industrial issues that affect all of us, and issues like that, I think, are the way we unite the union. However, I think we also have to face up to some of the sort of deeper and more personal aspects of this. I don't think the union can run away from it. I know other people in the room have been shocked at the level of abuse that there is on social media. I think there's no justification for it. Some of it's done anonymously. There are some deeply offensive posts being made in relation to this election. There are, regrettably, a lot of deeply sexist and misogynist posts that are being made. In particular, there are racist posts that are being made by anonymous accounts. There are also, sadly, some pretty horrific falsehoods being put about by people who in their own names, and I think that's pretty shocking and scandalous. And indeed, myself and the union's legal officer have had to take some legal advice on some of those postings. I don't. I think the world of social media is a difficult one, and people seem to get carried away, and it's not just the fire service or the FBU. There's a whole public debate around how people seem to think they are immune when they're on behind a keyboard. I often find that some people because my attitude normally is if people give me a bit of stick on Twitter or whatever, I'll offer to go and meet them. I've been to fire stations and find people are completely different when they're face to face, and far more reasonable when you talk to them face to face, and that's my normal approach. But equally, I don't think we can accept some of the level of bullying and frankly attempted intimidation that has taken place in some quarters, and that does need to be addressed. I think I will play my role, but I think all officials, I think the Executive Council needs to face up to that and set an example and say that we won't be tolerating this. The union has all sorts of very good rules and policies on how we should treat each other with dignity and respect and so on. But if we're going to have policies like that in words, we have to carry it out in practice as well, and we have to make sure that we insist that everybody carries it out in practice. It's not my style to abuse people. I would rather debate the issues, and that can be quite sharp. I'm not against sharp discussion and debate if that's on the issues. When that tips over into personal abuse and falsehoods and nastiness, that's where we have to draw the line. And I think there's a responsibility on all of us, and frankly, the higher up in the union we are, the bigger the responsibility is.
Thank you. Now, I know this event originally we were arranging or attempting to arrange a hustings. From my own personal view, I think hustings can be a very important part of an election. They provide members with the ability to, in real time, compare candidates and their answers to questions. What I would like to see is a movement within the FBU to make hustings a normal part of elections. Is that something that you think we could take forward and potentially have that discussion in the future for future elections?
Look, I've been in politics a long time, both through the union and outside of the union. I've got to say, I find it quite bizarre that we're not having discussions. This is your union. You should be able to hold me to account and hold any official to account, but also on discussing who should be your next General Secretary. I think you have the right, in my view, to hear both candidates and assess how we answer the same question in front of each other. So I find the whole recent debate around this event itself and why we're not having face-to-face hustings. Hustings can be done in all sorts of ways. It doesn't necessarily even have to be a direct debate between the two candidates. It can simply be in the same room where the same questions are asked. There's a whole range of ways in which a debate and hustings could be organised. But yeah, I think it should be normal. It's normal in all political activities. It's normal in general elections. Even for your local MP, there will be hustings in every constituency in this country between the different people who want to be the Member of Parliament. And that's perfectly reasonable, because people in elected office should be held to account. People should be able to hear face to face what people have got to say, but also to put their questions directly to them and hear the answers and then make an assessment, your own informed assessment. So I think, yes, it should be normal. I think it does not need to be divisive or toxic or any of those things. It should be done in a friendly and in our union, a friendly and comradely way, but it should happen.
Thank you. So that's the end of the questions that have been sent in advance. So I would like to open it up to the floor. So if anybody's got a question, just raise your hands. I don't know everybody's name, so I just ask that you introduce yourself when you stand up to ask your question. Yeah.
It's Steve Gregory Aston. You've been in this role for over 20 years. Why should members vote for you in the upcoming election?
Do you want me to just go straight into that?
Yeah, go for it.
Not quite over 20 years, Steve, thanks, but It's only 19 so far. Look, I would say people should vote for me because I don't find it's comfortable because I don't think I normally sing my own praises at all, actually. But I think you've got to in an election. I think I'm the best candidate. I'm absolutely clear on that. I put that on 2 points: on my record and the things that we have achieved while I've been in office, but also, more importantly, on what we've got to do over the next over the next 5 years. I've spent a great deal of time. In fact, I spend probably almost every day of my life thinking about this union and how it can survive and how we can improve the conditions, the pay, and the service that we live in, that we work in. And how I've spent a huge amount of my time thinking about how do we build teams of people. And we have a fantastic team at head office, and I've played a key role in building that team, both the elected officials, I mean, you choose them, but I've helped to develop them, and also the staff, and I think the staff are often underestimated. I think we have massively improved the way this union operates on research on fire service matters, on how we engage with politicians, which is, as you can all guess, quite a tricky way because politicians don't always do what they say they were going to do. And I think that experience, we're now at a unique time when that experience can come into play. I'll just give you a couple of examples. So the Grenfell Tower fire 7 years ago. If you want to look back, and I would ask people to do it, I think it's something, a horrific incident, but I think the role of this union in responding to that fire is something I am very proud of. You can hear, just I think about 10 days after the fire, I spoke at the Durham Miners Gala about the fire, and I think I set out in there what my assessment of what had caused such a loss of life, which was frankly nothing to do with firefighters turning left or right on the 4th floor. It was fundamentally, why were people allowed to clad a building like that in flammable material? And that's about government policy and deregulation. I think everything we did on that, we've been absolutely vindicated by the Phase 2 report. And if you read that, I mean, the whole report is huge, but if you read the executive summary of that inquiry, I think everything we've said about government failure, about deregulation, has been proved to be absolutely spot on. So we're now at the point where the findings of that report and the recommendations are now going to be put into place. That is likely to shape this service for the next 20 years. I've got to say, for no other reason than that, actually, I think I'm in a unique position as the person who has absolutely led on that issue for 7 years, and to say at that very moment, it's a time to change personnel and change me with someone who, without trying to be disrespectful, I've never heard say anything about Grenfell Tower, I think would be a significant mistake, let's put it that way, by this union. But similarly with the new government, the planning that we've put in advance of the election didn't happen overnight. We've been planning for something like 2 years as to what will happen with the next election. And no one could predict exactly what was going to happen, but it became increasingly likely the Tories were going to lose. It was a year before the election we published the Firefighters Manifesto, where we drew together all our policies and what we wanted off central government. So that was more than a year of planning for that document. We then spent the following year working on how can we make sure we get pledges off politicians for that general election. And we got the pledges, as I say, on national standards, on a national advisory body. We got pledges, and in even 3 words in the Labour manifesto, which were including through regulation. So there was a phrase about no repeat of the horror of the Grenfell disaster, and we insisted it had to mention regulation and deregulation. And we got the 3 words, including through regulation. And we had a battle, just by the way, just to get those 3 words in that document. So we now have to deliver on that, because just because politicians are elected, I'm sure no one in the room believes that just because they're elected, they will do what they said before they were elected. Our job and our challenge is, right, you made these pledges, you now have to deliver it. And I think I am probably uniquely placed to put the pressure on those people to deliver national standards in some form, that national advisory body which could change the shape of our service and our profession for years and years to come. I suppose the final point I'd say is, going back to what I said on pay, I think we're uniquely placed to start making up lost ground on pay, whether that's on control pay, as the question was asked, on trainee and development pay, and on the long-term pay structure and pay security of firefighters. That's our challenge, and again, I think I am uniquely placed to lead on those negotiations, but also where necessary to lead campaigns, which we may well need under this government if necessary.
Thank you. Okay, anybody else? Yeah.
Jack Lee from Staffordshire. You talked about national standards and advisory panels. In Staffordshire, we have no 2-pump whole-time stations. We're all single-pump whole-time stations. Every single one of those pumps is on for approximately 70% of the time. We have retained availability hovering between 50 and 60%. For us, it sounds like a dream to say that, if we have national standards, that will solve our problems overnight. But in reality, to put that into place is going to need investment from central government to actually be able to, to give the funds to allow us to get back up to those sorts of things. And I don't want to be doing our chief barrister's job of saying, oh, I can't afford to fund our fire services with the budget we've got. But in reality, we're going to have significant investment from government to achieve what we need to do. You obviously have those conversations at that level. What is the reality of getting that investment from central government? Because I know when we lobbied Parliament previously, we were told that there is no magic money to operate within fiscal policies. Is that National Standards Board likely to see improvements at ground level in a small timescale?
No, it's a brilliant question, and again, sorry to say this, but there's no easy answer to it. And I think if I came in and said yes, we're going to achieve that within the next year, that I would be being dishonest. I suppose for me, the starting point is, if you look at it, how it unfolded historically. The last Labour government abolished national standards. If we'd still had national standards in place, so we had national standards on response times, and some of you will remember them: A, B, C, D risk. A risk, which certainly the centre of Birmingham would have had A risk, I would imagine. I was a London firefighter. Most of central London was A risk, for example. Centre of big cities would be, and large towns would be A risk. The A risk national standard was from the time of call that you would need 3 fire engines, 2 within 5 minutes, 1 within 8 minutes. And then B risk lower down than that, and so on. So if you think about it, and then we had the confidence levels of what crewing levels should be. Those 2 standards alone protected fire cover and protected jobs in this industry. So the scrapping of those standards laid the basis for what became a race to the bottom, and which means that after 2010, when the new government came in, they could start cutting budgets, and because there's no standard, Staffordshire's got its own standards, the West Midlands got its own standard. Every fire service in the UK has got a different set of standards, and no one is meeting the same standards. Even on the question of, we raised a question after Grenfell, we wrote to Theresa May. Some of you will recall, we did a survey of what the PDA is to residential blocks of flats. Again, virtually every single fire service has a completely different PDA to those sorts of premises. And we said, how do you possibly justify that? The same architect may have designed a block of flats identically If they're in different fire and rescue services, they will get a different response, a different number of firefighters, different number of fire engines, and different times. And that doesn't make any sense. So it was the abolition of national standards that laid the basis for then the austerity cuts that we've had. So while national standards don't guarantee the end of that, they can be part of building a framework that begins to resist that. The second side of it is, how do we make the case, and you asked the question correctly, how do we make the case for investment? Because we've heard what Rachel Reeves has to say, there's no money and so on. So again, this will not be easy. We have to make a general case as part of the labour movement, say, we don't accept your arguments anyway. You need to put money into public services. You need to put money into education, health, and also the fire service. But within that, we also need to make a case for the fire and rescue service. And we have to make a case that politicians are going to think there's something in it for them. And I think we've got some messages that can help us there. So we have the question of, and you may have picked up, there's a bit of a dispute emerging in Greater Manchester over MTA. We have a local agreement in London and in Manchester on MTA, but the rest of the country, and I would argue they have probably the best MTA cover in the country as a result of that agreement, but we don't have that elsewhere. So MTA on climate change related incidents like moorland and grassland fires, wildfires, and on major floods. And most of you will have been to incidents like that, and you know how big they are, how sustained they are, how resource intensive they are. So large numbers of crews for lengthy periods of time. And we need to make the case, if you want to tackle those, then you need investment in service. The issue of an ageing population, the impact of that, the issue of new technology, battery technology, electric cars and so on. So we need to put together a package that says to a government, if you invest a relatively small amount of money into the fire service, you will be able to say to communities, we can guarantee you are now safer than you were before. Just resolving the MTA issue would make communities safer because we would have a better level of response. And that's the challenge that we have in front of us. But I think we would be naive to think any of that's going to, I know you clearly, by asking the question, you know it's not going to be easy, but that is the challenge that we have. I think we've got a fantastic story to tell about what our service can do. And I think they know we've got a fantastic workforce, which is our members. The members of this union provide a fantastic public service. We've got to sing the praises of what they do, but say actually we could do so much more with just a little bit of investment, which would start to rebuild the crewing levels. And I'll just do one more point, if I may. So the Mayor of Greater Manchester has just written to the Home Secretary on these very points, and he said, I've seen the letter. It's not our letter; it's a politician's letter, but it makes some very similar points. It says the government has dodged the issue of the fire service role in responding to MTA incidents. The government is avoiding the issue of climate change and floods and wildfires. He makes the point himself that firefighters need a pay rise. It makes a whole number of points. I think that's a fantastic bit of leverage for us because there will be a spending review in next spring, and our job now is to take those arguments that we've made, but actually we've now got politicians making similar arguments to go to central government and said, won't take actually that much. We will be better off. We'll be financially better off. We'll resolve issues like, we'll begin to resolve issues like crewing levels. But you do need to put some money into the fire service.
Brilliant. Thank you. So I'm just mindful of the time, so I'd like to give you the opportunity to sum up some of what you've talked about. So if we give you 3 minutes to sum up, Matt, I just don't want to keep the gentleman back too long.
Thanks very much, Martin. Thanks for thanks to the Brigade Committee and to the regional officials for their support for inviting me to speak. I think it is a great shame that we haven't had Steve here to have that discussion. It needn't maybe the term debate doesn't help, but to have a discussion around the challenges that we face in our service and in our union. I have heard it said that it's a good time to have a new General Secretary because, yes, Matt's faced all the tough time under the Tories. It will be slightly easier under a new government. I've got to say, it seems a little bit unfair that you get told you can deal with all the tough stuff then, but now it gets a little bit easier. You should move on. But actually, I don't think it's going to be easier. I think we're being naive if we think this is going to be easy. I think it is better, and the way I've described it is we've got some new opportunities, and we'd be silly not to take those opportunities. But for the very question that Jack just asked, this is not going to be easy to get money out of this government. It's going to be a campaign, and we're going to have to be determined. We're going to have to adopt exactly the same approach. That means hard evidence. The evidence is about taking it to the government, but the evidence is also actually about uniting our members. Because if our members are convinced of the case we're putting forward, they will fight harder and harder for it. That's why people fought on pensions. That's why people fought on pay. That's why people are fighting on decon, because we've provided hard evidence. And that's been my approach throughout my time as General Secretary. We provide hard evidence, we unite ourselves, and we take that to government, and we stay united. And as I say, I will repeat it, I've been disappointed at some of the language that's been used on social media as part of this campaign to say this union is disunited. I don't see that among members. I see it among some officials of the union, mainly officials in senior positions in this union. I do not see it when I visit fire stations and emergency fire controls. We are united. The greatest strength we have is when we are united. One thing I can say is that when I look across the table, and this happened when we got that 7% and 5%, when I look across the table into the eyes of the employers or into the eyes of a government minister, and I say, if you go down that road, I'm telling you, we will resist it, and if necessary, we will ballot. And I'm telling you, if we ballot, we will win that ballot. They know, when they look at me and they hear me, they know that I can deliver that. That's a unique power that this union has, that not every union in the country has. We risk that at our peril. I think we use that, and we use that, the collective, it's not just about me, we use the collective experience of this union and the successes we've had and the battles we've fought, including battles here in the West Midlands Brigade, to say, you don't push us around, we won't be pushed around, we will behave professionally, we will have a professional dialogue with you, but we're only willing to accept so much before we react. We build on that. We build on our traditions, on our knowledge of our own industry. You know this industry better than any politician. We build on that knowledge and that expertise to make the case for the fire service, to make the case for firefighters, for a better fire service, better emergency fire controls, better conditions for our members. And we build on that unity for the future. I am absolutely convinced that I am the best candidate to do that as General Secretary. I am building a team. I have been building a team throughout my time for the time at which I have to move on. I don't intend to be around here forever. I've got other things to do in my life and so on. But I think for the next 5 years, I am the best person placed to act as your General Secretary in those opportunities and the fights that we've got ahead. Thanks for your questions, and thanks, Martin, for chairing it.
Thank you, Matt. So I'd just like to say thanks to everybody who's come along. It is appreciated, and thank you, Matt, for giving us the time to come and answer some questions. And with that, we'll call an end to it.